Okay, so Illustrator can be used in every step of the user interface design process, right from the very beginning when you're sketching out ideas, right the way through to the finished work. It was reasonable at doing that up until about CS3, but there were still things where people think, do you know what, this is easier in Photoshop, even if they started the graphics in Illustrator and then ported them out to that. But from CS4 onwards, that became less of a necessity, and CS5, CS6 and certainly CC, which has something in it that is completely awesome if you work cross-media, it's not necessary really most of the time. Pretty much everything you can do inside of Photoshop you can actually do better with UI type graphics than you could do in that application. So what I'm going to do is just create a new document just here at the moment, just a new blank document. I'm using the web preset. I know I just skipped through that just there, but I'm using the web preset here, and I'm using a 960 by 560 document. 960 being sort of the lowest reasonable common denominator, okay, for screens. Now, of course, works perfectly for tablets, but for desktop screens, that's about where you want it to sit. Okay, so I'm just setting that up like so, RGB color mode, and I'm using this feature here, align new objects to pixel grid. Okay, so that's what I've got going on in there at the moment. So when I'm starting to work with sketching something out for an interface, like many other designers, I use a column system for doing that. I use a 12 column system for desktops, I use a 9 column system for tablets, and I use a 4 column system for phones and smaller screens. So that's kind of the way I do it. I like 12 because 12 is divisible by 2, 3 and 4, so I've got plenty of scope for how I do things. So what I'm going to do is just fit that to the window at the moment. I just need to cycle through modes actually. I was wondering why I couldn't see half of that stuff, and I'll just pull a few things here out of the way. I'm using less of a resolution than I would have liked, but that's fine. So to set that up, all I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself a layer on which I want to do that, because I'll be locking it off very shortly. And then I'm going to switch to my rectangle tool, and just before I draw anything, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the stroke off of this. So I've just swapped that out to take the stroke away, and then I'm just going to change the fill color. I like to use sort of a fairly light grey with these. I'm going to use something darker though today, so hopefully you can see that more clearly. In fact, do you know what, I'm going to bump that right up because of the projector. Okay, so once I've got that, I then come up to the top here, and when I'm at the intersection of the actual corner of the document just there, I'm going to click, and then I'm just going to dial in the same size dimensions as my document. So 960 by 560 I think is what I'm at. So if I do that, so that's all done. So I've got a rectangle on there, and I'm going to use this to set up my guides, and I'm going to do that by splitting this into a grid. So I'm going to come to the object menu and then come down to the path submenu from there and choosing split into grid. And so from there, what I'll do is I don't need to do anything with rows. I'll just append the number of columns there with a 2 to make that up to 12. And then I'm going to just work on my gutters, because I'd like a 10 pixel gutter in between each column. So I'll just dial that up like so. Now when you're doing this, you kind of need this to be a whole number on here. At the moment, that's showing me that will be 70.83. On there, and that's kind of tricky, so I would need to do something about that. I'm not quite sure why that's calculated out like that, but it should be around that. But ordinarily anyway, you'd need to try and go for a whole number. But I'll click OK, and you can see there I've got a grid straight away, which I can use to facilitate my layout. So I'm just going to lock that layer and make it inactive by taking the layer above, and then I can start to lay out things on that page. Now if I'm interacting with a client and they want to see things, the more polished something looks, the more it looks like they're excluded from the design process. So what I tend to do is make things look a little bit sketchy when I show them the layout, because it looks like I've sat there and painstakingly drawn everything. Of course, that'd be daft. I haven't done that on here. I want to just use the tools inside of Illustrator. Now I have some preset symbols that I've made and I'll show you how to make them in just a second. If I just borrow this one here, so I'm just going to cut that out of there and come back and drop this down. So you can see this looks nice and sketchy, like so. Okay, and then I can just drag that out to however many columns I want on there. And again, it looks all scribbly. I achieve that really, really simply. Okay, what I do is I start off with a line. So I get the line tool, draw a line like so. I'll just give that just straightforward black stroke on there. Just one point is just fine. Can you see that okay? Perfect. And then I switch across to the warp tool. Okay, and then I just start to pull the line around a little bit. Don't really want to go too far. I was a bit super enthusiastic with those two things just there, but you do need to give the curves just a little bit of magnitude in order for them to work best. And you can just brush along like so. You can brush backwards and forwards on there. Then I'm going to use the Align Points feature, which is a line which you get from the Path submenu. The shortcut is Alt-Command-J, normally used before you join two endpoints together to make sure that the points line up. I'm just going to use it by the shortcut there, and I'm going to align these horizontally, like so. If I click OK, then all of the points there line up. Right? They're all in a dead straight line, but I've still got the bendiness of the line from the magnitude that I just expressed. Then I take this across into the brushes panel, like so. There are some I made earlier. They come along with this symbol just here, and turn that into an art brush. So that artwork will be stretched along the vector effect that I apply there. So I'm just going to accept the defaults on that. And once I've drawn that brush, I can then get something like a rectangle and then just apply that brush stroke to it, and you can see instantly that looks a whole lot more sketchy. Now you can see I did do a bit too much variation in the bumps there, but that's kind of nice. It looks like I've drawn it furiously with the passion for getting this job out for the client. So, and you can build on that. I sometimes add 2 or 3 things, and I add them at different weights. So I have one that's at a really, really low weight, and then one that's slightly heavier. So it's as if I'm finding the line inside of there. Takes you a little while to build those things, but once you've built them, you can have them in a document and then load them as a symbol library. So you can bring all those things to whatever document you're working in, or as I prefer to do ordinarily, I bring everything together in one place and then save it as an Illustrator template, which means I can just open it from there and everything I need is ready to start work. And then I can just add these and turn them into a symbol. So from the symbols panel, I just drag that one in like so. Most of the stuff inside of here pertains to Flash export, apart from one thing which I'll talk about later, right? But most of that is not relevant. Whether it's a movie clip or a graphic has no meaning inside of Illustrator whatever, right? So I'll just call this just box on there, for example, and now that becomes a symbol. I can manipulate it to a point. There does become a point, as you can see there, when you stretch out multiple lines, the gaps become larger between them, so you sometimes get a thickening of some strokes, but that's not working out too badly. And then I create other ones. I create ones with a circle and a triangle in to indicate a movie, so that has a box with those things in, and I apply the same sketchy effect to them. In fact, a way you can make that even quicker in itself is if you take something, if I just break the link to that symbol just there, so I just clicked here in the symbols panel to break that link, just so I've gone back to regular art, is I can open the graphic styles panel. In fact, I'll tear that off just for a second and bring that out, and then just drag this in so that that's available as a graphic style, which means if I draw any other element, so if I go ahead and draw my little play icon, let me just draw an ellipse first on there, and then I'll draw a triangle inside of that ellipse. So if I start drawing that and bring that down to 3 sides, kind of park that like that, because I don't want it to be dead straight, because I'm going to make it look sketchy anyway. Once I've done that, I can select those 2 things and just with one click apply my graphic style to them. That one's a bit too heavy, that line, a bit too flexible for that, but you get the idea, yeah? And you would learn very, very quickly where to rein the warp thing in, and just to get a slight amount of oscillation. So you have some grander ones for where you're doing your lighter lines, and then as you find the line you have less in between there. Hopefully you can follow that. So graphic style is another important part of the UI development process, okay, because once you've created a graphic style, if you need to modify it, everything using that graphic style will change. So if I just rectify my super wobbly line just there by drawing another one, so if I just draw a line across here, this time I'll be slightly more restrained with the warp tool, so I'm just switching to that and then just kind of bending that around just a little bit in there, tiny bit of oscillation in the middle, but I want the ends to be sort of straight. Once I've done that, I can add that to the brushes panel like so. So in that comes, that's going to be an art brush. I can pretty much just click through those things because I just want them to apply like so. And then I'm going to apply that brush, okay, to this shape, and you can see how now that looks much steadier, much more like the final thing. To update the graphic style that this thing here is using, all I need to do is drag that into the graphic styles panel, hold down the Alt key and target that, and you'll see that that updates straight away. So everything using it changes. I have a very, very simple rule with Illustrator, whether it's for UI or print or screen. If you're using something more than once, turn it into a symbol and turn the way that it appears into a style. Towards the end, you'll see the huge benefit of that little bit of forethought. Okay, so I can use that to sketch things out, and then I can kind of fire that across to the client and say, right, okay, or go and see them and say, right, okay, I thought we'd have this here, and we'd have a movie over there, and we'll have the header, and we'll have a navigation here, and sketch all those things out. Just make it look, you know, a bit more hand drawn. Okay, I mean, most of the time a client won't know if they're getting it by an email or doing a screen sharing exercise. They won't care. All they'll care about is they still find themselves involved in the design process, right? Still at a stage where things are negotiable without having spent too much money. Okay, so you can do that. Then you want to move across to actually starting to develop that onwards from there. For that, I generally start with another document. I do use my column layout in there. What I think I might do is borrow that one out of here just to save myself a little bit of time. Really, really low resolution in terms of the display, so I'm sorry that I'm stuck with everything crammed into one tiny bit, but that's just the way it is. So come out to there, and I'll just park another layer in there for the grid, and then just drop that in there like so. I might actually just drop the opacity of that down because that is a little bit in your face. Just there, just check that's coming across on there. Fine, that's great. Okay, so that's all good. So I can lock that up, and then I can start to work on this. I have also made a screen grab here of a Chrome bar from the Chrome browser, because that kind of helps in the visualization process. It's good for me, so I can see how it works in relation to the Chrome of the browser. It's good for the client because they start to, not everybody's gifted with the same level of visualization skills, so it kind of helps for them to see what it will look like in a real world kind of situation. That Photoshop was involved in that one to get that. Obviously that would just be the most efficient way to do it. I just did a simple screen grab, very, very easy on a Mac, very, very easy on a PC to do that, and then I just neutralized it. I took anything out of the tab just there, which took me like a couple of seconds to do that, and then I just made this shorter just by selecting one half of it and then just shunting it across until I'd got it at the size I wanted it to be presented at. Okay, so I've got that, and then I can start work on my layout. So I've got a partially prepared thing or two just here, and so I can talk about bringing some of these things in. So what my design that I'm evolving right now in front of you involves is a navigation bar across the top, right? So the main site navigation will be appended to the top of the screen on here. So I'm going to start to draw that on there. So I'm just going to switch to the rectangle tool, and then I'm going to come out and draw this across like so. Okay. And what I want to do with that is I actually want that to have sort of that soft rubberized feel to it, which is achieved, right, by using a gradient with a very small amount of variation between the two tones inside of it, right? So just a slightly lighter grey against just a slightly darker grey, for example. Again, because I'm projecting this, I'll have to sort of make that a little bit more start for there. So I'm just going to apply a gradient to this like so, and then I'm going to work in the gradient panel. So I'm going to turn this into a radial gradient from there, and then I'm going to start adding a couple of colour stops to that. So I'm just going to use a couple of greys inside of here. I'm just going to use this one, mid grey, and then I've just accidentally added another swatch just there. So I'll just take that last one out. Just remove that. So let's just have a look. I think there's enough variation in there. Hopefully you can see that all right. So it's just enough variation in there. And this will go to the very first of the things I'll mention that Photoshop can't do. Okay, and that's change how elliptical the gradient is. If you've used the gradient tool in Photoshop, I don't have Photoshop running at the moment, but if you've used the gradient tool in Photoshop, you will know that the radial gradient that you've got there, you click at one place, you drag to another, and you do get a gradient that emanates outwards, but it is circular. If you want it to be elliptical, you've got to squash it, which means you're reordering the pixels, and by effect, destroying the gradient you've just made, right? Because it's going to get all crunched up. But Illustrator makes that really, really simple. If I go for the gradient tool just here, so my gradient annotator has just appeared. I'm just going to bring that down so you can see the top of the annotator, and I can just take this and squish that down to an elliptical gradient like so. If I make it larger, and I can change so many things in here, and it's completely dynamic. Now, even if I took this across into Photoshop, right, I could still bring it in as a smart object just so I've got the flexibility there with that gradient. So I can bring the center of that down just to change the way that's put together, and then I can end up with a completely different feel in there. I don't have to start the gradient inside the object. I kind of want to go with that. So you can see that's got quite a bit of variation inside of it. Now I am just going to launch Photoshop in the background, so you'll see the Photoshop splash screen pop up in just a second, and I can switch away from that, and I'll go to it in just a moment. So I just want to talk about the thing I just mentioned to you if you really feel that you do still have to use Photoshop in part of this process, because if I wanted that out as one solid image for inside of there, I don't, as it happens, and you'll see why in just a little while. But if I did, okay, then I could prep that in Photoshop also. I could also export it directly from Illustrator, but I'm just going to go with the scenario because as you're probably not going to change the way you work overnight. Yeah, you're probably going to sort of bring yourself into it by changing a little bit at a time. So I'm just going to copy that out of there, and then I'm going to create a new Photoshop document over here, and I'll make that 960. It's taken on the clipboard just there, but I'll just go with that size and pop that down. And then when I paste this, I get the choice to bring that in as a smart object, which is just great because I can just drop that down like so, and that's applied. And then if I think I need to change any part of that, if I double click here for the smart object, it takes it back out to its parent application, in this particular case Illustrator, so I can go for that, and then I can make any changes I want to make to that. So let's just say, for example, I wanted to change the color of that for whatever reason. You can see I can do that, close the document, save it, back in Photoshop, it updates straight away. So it's just a perfect workflow between those two things if I'm intent on using Photoshop to do that. Okay, but like I said, I'll show you very shortly why I probably wouldn't be in reality. Okay, so I'll pop back out to there. So that will work just fine. I think I'm actually going to have another one of those just down here, just for the time being, as the sort of main background for the page. That's the kind of feel I want to go for it. I want this sort of gradated, highlighted feel, okay, as if the page is being softly lit from somewhere. That's the kind of thing I'm going along with. So I'm just going to lock off that layer, I think, and add a new one to keep working on. Okay, and ultimately as well, if I was still intent on working with everything here and then porting it out to Photoshop, of course, remember that you can export this from Illustrator if you want to, and it will export it with all of the layers intact to work in Photoshop as well. So again, if you're sort of transitioning to working more with Illustrator to design the UI, but you want to do the final prep in Photoshop, you can do that, and it's nice and flexible that way. So now I'm going to bring in an image for the header on here. So I'm going to bring that down by placing it, and I'm just going to choose one of these free stock images from Alejandro Escamilla. Okay, so there's a few different things on here. That's the dewdrops I use. Let's have a look. There's a nice, that's one of the Tumblr ones. There's a nice one here of a bridge city. I like that one. I'm going to use that one, I think. So just going to bring that down and then just line that up and get that out to size like so. So that's great. Just park that down on there. Choose the bit I want. And of course I'm not going to use the whole image on there. I only want just a section of it just for my header. So I'm going to use the mask feature inside of Illustrator to mask the image off. So bring that up into there and then bring that up into there while I'm working on the mask. Let me just see the rest of the stuff. So I can bring that down. That's great. I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to come back out to that and then I'm going to lock that image off like so. Then add another layer for that. Okay. I'll be doing a lot with the layers panel in just a little while. Okay. Well, in fact, the first of those things you'll see in just a moment. Then I can start to lay out other things and to mock other things up. Now, one of the things I'm actually after is this way of presenting images. What I'd like it to look is a little bit like a Polaroid. Remember those? Yeah? Okay. So I want it to look like a Polaroid, which is just kind of sitting off the page like that. So it's just got a tiny little shadow underneath it, so just looking as if the corners are curling up. Of course it's not, it's perfectly regular. I don't know if you can see the shadow just under there. If I turn the background off just for a minute, if I turn those, so I'm unlocking them and not turning them off, that was clever. Hopefully you can see the shadow under there now from the projection. So, okay. Of course it's not, it's a perfectly regular shape, but we see what we want to see, and when we see that shadow poking out from underneath, even though this is a dead straight line, you imagine that the corners are curling up. Interesting, isn't it, how we kind of work like that. But this is achieved just from one single rectangle, so I'll show you how I would make something like that. Okay, to do this. So I'd start out, of course, as I've just mentioned, with a rectangle, like so. Okay, and I'm just going to start off with the background colour for my Polaroid on there. So let's just change that to white. And then I'm going to use the appearance panel. In fact, I'm going to use it so heavily that I'm going to drag this out into the interface as well. Didn't mean to collapse that just down like that. There we go. So this at the moment has the combined thing of a white fill and a grey stroke around the edge. The grey stroke's just fine, excuse me, around there. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add another fill to that. So I've just added that like so. Okay, you can do these things from down the bottom here to add those on. So I've added another fill on top, and then I'm going to use an effect. So that's isolated just there, or isolated selected, and I'm going to come down to distort and transform and choose the transform effect dialog just here. So this kind of journey actually starts at the bottom of the dialog because you need to kind of see what you're doing, preview essentially, and because I want this to affect itself from the center, I'm going to make sure that the center transformation point is chosen just there. Okay, and then I'm just going to dial down the scale, so I'm going to sort of bring that down there like so, tab through and bring that down, and maybe want to bring that down just a touch more inside of there. I'll just go back up and do that like so. So that's kind of there. I might just want to make that just a little bit shorter than it is wide, and then I'm going to move it up a little bit because Polaroids sort of had a slightly more generous border on the bottom. Okay, so I want to kind of emulate that if I can, so I'm just going to shift that up vertically, so minus numbers for that, because remember the 0 point is the top left hand corner of the document area, so smaller numbers move things up, bigger numbers move things down. So I've just shunted that up just a little bit. If I take it up quite a way, you can see that moving like so. I just want to do a little bit more of a tweak there with the horizontal. It's not quite the way I want it. There you go. That's much better. Okay, so once I'm happy with that, remember it's one object, so just one thing to move around. Very handy to do that. Now I'm going to work on the shadow from underneath. So I'm going to add yet another fill to this object. So that fill's just on the top there. So I'm going to drag it down to the bottom of the stack. And then I'm going to turn that to black. Now you're not going to see it at the moment because it's underneath this one and this one, but just to show you that it is there, I'm just turning the visibility on and off for those. In fact, I might just keep the visibility for that one off just at the minute. So with this one, I'm going to warp this to start that off. So I'm going to go to the Effect menu and come down and choose Warp. Effects are marvelous, right? Because they're not a permanent thing. This is the other major advantage of Illustrator over Photoshop. If you did this sort of thing with a filter in Photoshop, if it isn't a smart object, that's it, it's done. You've got to remove it and reapply that effect, whereas here it's just a couple of clicks away. Okay, so I'm just going to choose one of these effects. It doesn't really matter which one I choose because it will give me a menu. So the arc one, not terribly brilliant for that. Let's have a look at the arch. The arch kind of achieves what I'm after in some ways. All right, it's doing the whole thing as an arch. I can change the amount of bend in there if I need to. I don't want to make that too grand. I just want it to be just enough. Okay, so there you go. That's got that sort of arch effect on it. I'm going to click OK through that, and then I want to apply the transform effect to that also. So I'll go up to that and choose transform. So I'm combining those things here. Turn on the preview, and so I want to transform that. I'm going to start off with the bottom registration point just here, and then I want to scale that down vertically. So I'm just going to start to bring that down. Nice. That's going to come within the boundary. Can you see that? The yellow boundary of the shape. So that's kind of down on there. I'm going to keep going with it. And then I actually want to move it vertically. So remember, smaller numbers to move things up. So I'm just going to sort of bring that. Actually, I might come down a little bit with that. There you go. I'm going to do the other way. I'm going to come down with that. So now that's just poking out of that box there like so. Perfect. That's pretty much exactly what I'm after. One more thing to do to that now, because it's a very, very hard edge shadow, simply dealt with by going up to the Effect menu, choosing Stylize from the Illustrator effects, and then choosing Feather from there. And then I can just sort of feather that off, so you can see that softens that effect. Once I've done that, I'll turn on the white there. Okay, so that's not quite poking out just enough from under there. Shall I turn the background off and make it just... Hopefully you can see that more easily on the projection, but if not, you can always watch the video later on the Academy Class channel. You'll see it from there. So that's not quite poking out enough, but very, very easily to remedy, because all I need to do is click for the Transform Hyperlink on the combined effect just there, and straight into here, and then just decide how I'm going to move that around. So I actually perhaps want to make that, if I turn preview on, that would be even better. There you go. And you can see that now I can move that. I'll move it quite a way out so you can see it moving. Then I can kind of modulate that to be however I want it to be. And I think at that, I'm kind of quite happy with that. So there you go. I've built that thing there. That stroke can come off now. I don't need it. I only wanted it so I could see the white edges around there. Everything else does the job just for me. And I could carry on. I could have maybe a softer shadow around the whole thing as well. But you get the idea, right? That it's all possible from inside of here. And it's all very, very flexible. Okay, so moving on from that, one of the other things I've got inside of here, okay, is this rectangle like so. Now, normally I'm an advocate, so this would be sort of a dialog box or something on the side there, that kind of thing. Normally, I'm an advocate of using the rectangle tool to draw something and then applying the rounded corners effect to it, because that's more flexible for the reasons you've just seen. But with a feature that I'm going to show you inside of Illustrator CC, I've kind of had to learn to love again the rounded rectangle tool inside of here. And so this one you drew like so, and you could use your arrow keys while you were drawing to sort of get the corners so they felt about right for what you were doing. The only thing is, if that box changed in nature, yeah, there's only a few ways you can work with it, because if I now chose to make that wider, you can see how that's not working out terribly well with the corners. Well, all is not completely lost on that if I did want to go down that route, and I'll show you that in just a second. Right, so one of the ways you would work with that is to isolate it like so, and then if you needed to make it narrower, you'd have to select all of those points and then kind of move that in like so. So that's one way you could do that, but that involves a couple of steps. It's not a wrong way to do it, just maybe not the most efficient way. Let me just park that one out of the way. One way I could do that is to involve 9-slice scaling into this that I mentioned earlier. So if I turn this into a symbol, let's say I'm going to use this in 2 or 3 different places throughout my mock-up, what I could do is turn that into a symbol. So I'm just going to bring that across to the symbols panel and park that in there, okay, and I'm just going to call this box like so, and I'm going to enable guides for 9-slice scaling. You'll see this twice this morning, 9-slice scaling. Okay, so if I just click OK just there, that's now a symbol instance. I'm going to edit the symbol, so I'm going to come across here and double click on it so you can see it. These are the guides that give you 9-slice scaling, and basically what you're doing, where the guides intersect on the corners, that region is not viable for scaling. Okay, it won't scale. Yeah? Whereas these regions here will. Okay, so I can take that out. Now just to make that slightly more obvious, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change that over to a gradient inside of there so you can see how that would work on there. I'm going to come out of that, so the symbol definition has changed. Now you'll see that if I resize it, the corners stay intact. Everything else scales. So if you're drawing web buttons, yeah, to start off with, that's one way to approach it. If you don't know what the width of the button is or the height of the button is going to be, obviously up to a certain point determined by the corners, but you can see how flexible all of that is. Certainly if I'm only comping, yeah, that's going to work perfectly well for me doing that. Like I said, you'll see that again in just a moment. Now on the subject of symbols, I'll come back to the rounded rectangle tool and why I favour that in just a little bit. So I'll bring all of those strands together towards the end. I haven't lost the thread on it, don't worry, you will see it. Okay, so on the subject of symbols, Illustrator actually comes with a whole bunch of symbols that you can use in UI development. Whenever you use a document that uses the web profile, it comes in with all of these symbols directly in there. Okay, so there are some common things that you might use, okay, on a site and on a visualization for a site, if not the final product. There are also some other symbol libraries. If I just go to the loader down at the bottom here, right, that can work for us as well. You can see web buttons and bars and web icons just there. So they come out as their own little library. So even if they're a starting point for something else, it's one less thing for you to draw. If I go for that and then just choose the web buttons and bars, because this one I do use quite a lot for these things here, search bars. There's loads of buttons in there that I generally tend to draw my own first, right? But there are plenty of things in there for you to use. This search bar though, if I bring one of these out, so let's just grab one of these and pull that one out. Let's have a look. That's just ideal. Okay, so this search bar is dead handy. I can use that in my layout from there. The only thing is, with this particular symbol, it's not desperately scalable in that way. It's kind of meant to be used as is. Now that's a little bit on the big side, to be perfectly honest. To show you that, I'm going to bring in some text from over here. So I've got a few little fragments of text here and there. In fact, I'll use this bit just here, which are actually my notes on there. I'll just park those down onto this document. So these have been done at 16, or should be done at about 16 pixels in there. If I dial in 16 px just for there, right, you can see how they relate in terms of that. So 16 pixels, remember, the default for a desktop browser. Okay, and you can see how that matches up for that. And then, but what I generally tend to do with my styles is drop the body down to 62.5%, which means that the base size then becomes 10 pixels, and 10's a much easier number to manage when you're doing relative sizes. So I'm going to do exactly that just there. I'm going to drop this down to 10 points. So on that, I'll probably make my my base font size around about 12 or 14. And then this box, of course, doesn't work brilliantly in that kind of situation. You can see that it's much, much larger than the text there. So I want to modify this symbol, okay, to accommodate the guide. So what I'm going to do first of all is break my link to it over here. I click, that breaks the link to the symbol. This then just becomes drawn art, and then I'm going to drag it back into the symbols panel. I'm just going to call this one my search bar, like so, and I'm going to enable grids for 9 slice scaling on here, and then I'm going to edit that. This one I'm going to edit in place, so I'm just going to double click on it here, and there are my grids, or my guides rather. And all I want to do here, because I'm not really worried about the corners, it's mainly only the width quite often I want to change on these things. So I'm actually going to bring this guide down towards the middle, like so, and I'm going to bring this guide here up to meet it in the same place. Okay, so there's not going to be any height scaling on there, but the width will scale perfectly well for me. And then I can go about resizing that like so. So first of all, the size of it overall, I should have resized it first. The sizing of it overall isn't too much of a problem. You see, now if I scale this out, you can see it keeps that side to side, so I can change the nature of the bar. I should have made it smaller actually before I tried scrunching it down, because as you can see, that's not going to work brilliantly in there. But I could always go in and edit the symbol and change that afterwards. So I don't know why the guides have changed just there, very strange. Okay, so that's how you can create a search bar and other such UI elements inside of there just to get you going. One of the things that Creative Cloud brings into the mix, so I'm just talking now specifically about Illustrator CC. So less and less do we want to do image replacement inside of user interfaces for web applications. And so we're using web fonts. If you're using those already, you're either using them from Typekit, which are now owned by Adobe, or Google Fonts, you might be using those. Typekit comes with Creative Cloud, and the big benefit is it's not just for web fonts. If you've ever designed an interface and thought, well, this is the font I'm going to be using in the final product, but I haven't got a desktop version of that, you're basically getting a screenshot of it or tracing it or doing whatever to say, well, this is the font I'll be using, but this isn't the real one. Whereas using Typekit makes that dead simple. You can see I've got one here earlier on. So I'm just going to browse the fonts on Typekit for a moment, and then I'm going to use the filters inside of there to sort of bring that down. So let's just say, for example, I want something that looks scripty in this particular design. You can see how that filters like so. I want something that's also decorative inside of there, right? So I can bring those things down. And then you can see here that I've got these buttons show that it's available for both web and desktop use. Okay, so that's the one I've used earlier, Sneaker Script. There's another ultra wide version of it, so I'll come through, I'll choose this this post type one just there, and then I'll go to that. I can look at all of the different styles and so on from there, and I'll just click for or use. And also I actually want to use this on my desktop, so it will sync to there. I just need to launch that. Actually, it should be running, but I'll just do it anyway. So it's just telling me that I want to launch that, and it should be available in there in just a second. So it's just syncing. Selling Sneaker Script Medium has been added, so I'm kind of done with that. You can choose one, you can choose as many as you need. And now if I go into Illustrator, I'm just going to point text here, and I'm just going to do accelerate, if I can spell it, inside of there, and I'll just make that larger so you can see that. Kind of missing that thing. There you go. Obviously the double C is for Creative Cloud, of course, from there. And then if I go to my character panel just here, you'll see that if I start to type in sneakers, they both become available just there. So there's my ultra wide version. I can use that on the desktop, and that will be exactly the same thing that I then load into my style sheet so that I'm using that as a web font. And if I needed to, as a fallback, I could still create an image from this to use within there as well. So I've got the fallback if nothing else works, or if there isn't a viable internet connection at the time. Okay, so I've got everything there around that. Now I can start doing things as I normally would do with styling that. So I can make that white, for example, just inside of there, and I might decide to add a drop shadow to it. Why not? So I'll just park that on there, and I'll just use the default thing here. Let's choose black for that, and everything else there is just fine. Okay, so I'm getting towards the stage here where I've got things that I actually want to start using, okay, in my final application. There is one more step that I'll come back to in just a second, but just before I do that, I want to show you why this is so brilliant in CC. So I've already got the appearance I want here for my comp, but now I'm ready to start deploying it. And that's where this new panel comes in, okay, the CSS Properties panel. I'm just going to do a couple of little bits here now. I'm going to select this text, and I'm going to, in my Layers panel, I'm going to name it. I'm just going to call this header H1. Oh, sorry, H1 class header, that's what I was after. H1 header on there. So I've actually named it, and you'll now see that the panel, right, is giving me the font family, the font size, the color, right, in both models, in RGB and hex, and it's giving me the text shadow property. Now there it's giving me the actual CSS3 property from that, but if I wanted the vendor specific stuff, I can click on export options just here and say what I would like it to include. Fantastic panel. If you name things in here, because you can generate CSS for unnamed objects, okay, but if you name them, right, then it does it automatically. Otherwise, you have to turn that on just here. So if I just click generate CSS for this object at the moment, oh, it actually is generating me that. I might still have that on. Ah, it's named. That's why I gave it a name earlier on. I gave it a name called HBox, if you remember. So there you go, it's given me the background for that, it's given me the border radius across with the two vendor prefixes on it afterwards as well, which is pretty good. Saves me going out. It means that I can present this to my client. They've got something, well obviously not this, it'd need tidying up a little bit. But once I've got it ready, I can present it to the client. If they sign it off, all I need to do is export the CSS from that. And I could do it for the whole document just here using this export selected CSS just from there, or copy it and then come over to Dreamweaver or whatever application and start building that inside of there. Okay, so it gives me all of those things. Why I've had to rediscover my love for the rounded rectangle tool is this, because if I use this system of applying my corners as an effect, which is great and it's really, really flexible, okay, like so, I ought to give that a slightly more generous corner radius than that, really. Just bump that up to 30, that's fine. Okay. If I do this, and I will name it inside of here, naming, by the way, if you're going to start exporting SVG, which people will ask for much more often, name everything and use groups and use symbols, because in SVG they port across perfectly. Okay. So if I just name this one, I'll just call this one O-Box, just there like so. Once it's named, the CSS Styles panel is just giving me the background colours for it. You see, it's not taking into account the border radius. If I expand the appearance, then it does. Yeah? So you can use it if you're being flexible inside of there, right? But you need to expand the appearance or to draw your elements with the rounded rectangle tool. Okay, so it gives you all of those wonderful things. The other thing that Photoshop can't do that Illustrator can is this. If you're drawing icons like so, now alright, they look super sharp in here because they're vectors. Illustrator has an answer for that in the form of pixel preview. So from the view menu you can choose pixel preview and then it adds the anti-aliasing effects onto that. Well, that's not the bit that Photoshop can't do, right? What Photoshop can't do is do all of them at once. Okay, so if I've got an array of icons like that distributed out, these are all on different artboards. This is for an actual product. It's called Report Assist. It's a mate of mine's company that produced this product. I draw his icons for them. If I make changes inside of here, I can export the icons in one go. Right? I just want to show you how these things are built, just to give you an idea of how streamlined you can make this process. So I'll just use the artboard I had at the start here, because there's a scheme for this entire array, because with these icons they all need 4 different states. They need an available for use state, right, so an up state. They need an active hover state, so when because this is a desktop application, doesn't appear on a tablet, so the mouse hover thing is still there. It needs a hover state. It needs an active state, and it needs an unavailable state as well, right? So if something is locked off, it's just dimmed out. And so I have an array of those icons in different documents. Same document, saved as, with its different color schemes. When I created these, I created them with a specific color scheme. I used the color guide panel, right, to give me a color harmony that would work in these things. And then I created swatches based on those, okay? And then I created gradient swatches from there, each one using a different harmony inside of there. So you can see that I've got this is the unavailable state, for example, from there. That's the active state, and so on. Okay, there are a few different versions of this one in here, right? But by using that harmony, when I was creating the thing, when I was determining it, I could take something like the color guide panel, go to the edit tab. So here's the relationship between these two things. I think it's about 15 degrees. It's 12 degrees on the color wheel. That's the relationship between those two things. Because they have a relationship, I can lock the relationship together and then just move them around predictably like that. Can you see that? And I know that that relationship is preserved because I've got one. Even if I flip it over the other way, which you do sometimes, I still know that it's within 12 degrees of each other. Once you've got a system like that, it's really easy, right, to turn that into a gradient, and then by extension to turn that appearance, okay, into a graphic style. So you'll see there are graphic styles just here. So I can modify that, and then what I can do is change that over, right? And so if I make my modification just here now to that, so I'm just going to change that for this gradient, and then I'm going to update that graphic style like so. Actually, I'm using this one on everything else just there. So if I just show you all of those things, they've all changed at once, and then I can go to the File menu. I can choose Export from there, right? And then just say I want them to go out as PNGs. I want you to use all of the artboards and export, and it's done in under 5 seconds. If you can get someone who can do the same thing with Photoshop, I would like to meet them. Okay, really would. Okay, so that's some of the reasons why you consider using Illustrator for your UI development. Okay, because there's every tool you could possibly want in there, right, to achieve the results you're after. Okay.